Hello, hello. This is Tyson Farmer from TysonFarmer.com. I'm sure you've heard about how important it is to use a metronome or other timekeeping device in your music practice, but I don't feel most people know why it's so important. So in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about some reasons why using a metronome is so important. As organic human beings, our playing tempo is naturally connected to a whole bunch of factors that can potentially screw up your timing, like your heartbeat, whether you're tired or energized, your mood at the time of playing, are you cranky or mellow or happy or excited or pissed off at something? These moods all affect your tempo in different ways. Whether you've had a good day or a bad day, how much sleep you got last night, and even who you're playing for. Is there a special someone in the audience that makes you a little nervous or self-conscious? Did you just drink a bunch of coffee? Are you playing for a tough crowd? For example, I always get a little nervous and self-conscious when I know there's another professional musician in the audience when I'm playing. Are you just chilling out and playing in your own bedroom? When you're practicing in the privacy of your own room, you'll probably play more relaxed, but when you are in front of people, you're naturally more focused or jittery, which makes you play a little faster. This is why the bands you love almost always play their songs faster on stage than they do on the album. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, you try to keep your tempo in check when there are thousands of screaming fans pumping your adrenaline up. However, this factor is becoming a thing of the past since a lot of bands nowadays play to a reference click track in their earphones, which of course circles us around to the subject of a metronome. To really dig into why the metronome is so important, let's talk about what happens if you never use one. If you never use a metronome to hone your playing skills and tempo, you will naturally always be relying completely on your own instincts and feel to keep you in tempo, which I suggest is a bad idea in the long run. In fact, I'm going to make a bold statement here. Unless you were touched on the brow by the hands of the music gods when you were born, you basically can't trust your inborn human rhythm. Even if you know a lick or exercise really well, your rhythm will still fluctuate for all the reasons I mentioned before. And if you're still in the process of learning a lick or melody or song, you'll just naturally play faster on the easier parts of the lick that you're good at and play slower or even screech to a halt on the harder parts that you suck at, which makes your playing just go all over the place, with the tempo sounding really jerky and uneven like you're driving a car and gunning the gas or tapping the brakes at random times on the highway, instead of driving smoothly along at an even speed. So the first purpose of a metronome is to streamline and give continuity to your playing. It evens your playing out in proportion with itself by giving you a reference point to where the beat should be at all times, instead of relying on your own perspective of where you think or guess it should be, which will always be naturally skewed in favor of the path of least resistance. This lack of continuity over time also explains why sometimes you might play great on an exercise or lick, only to suck the next time and be left wondering what magic you stumbled upon and wondering how you can duplicate it. If this sounds familiar, you need to start working with a metronome. Now, talking about a metronome helping to eliminate the fluctuating quality of your playing brings me to my next point. When you're practicing a difficult lick or exercise against your own inner tempo, you may feel like you're doing fine on it, all the while not realizing that you're subtly slowing down on the harder parts and speeding up on the faster parts, only to then try playing along in tempo with the song or other musicians and see it quickly becoming a train wreck. This is an insidious and almost deadly thing for your playing, since your hands will only do what you tell them to do most often, including playing something wrong or with fluctuating tempo. What I'm trying to say here is that if you practice all the time with fluctuating tempo, you'll get really good at playing with fluctuating tempo. And that's obviously something you don't want, since it becomes a natural habit you have to work hard to undo. This phenomenon is hard to track from your personal perspective, since you're sort of at the steering wheel and observing the music from a first-person perspective. Now, sometimes recording yourself and listening back to your playing can reveal these inconsistencies, sometimes painfully, since you're listening from a third-person objective place, like a hypothetical audience member. However, a much easier way to shed light on these inconsistencies is by, you guessed it, using a metronome. So this brings us to our next reason why using a metronome is so important. It immediately lays bare any problem spots and throws your strengths and weaknesses into sharp contrast. This way you can easily then make an informed decision on what you need to work on next and where you should steer your efforts. With a metronome, it's easy to tell what needs the most work and exactly where, because you'll immediately trip and fall on your face on any problem spots while using one. Once you've used the metronome to highlight your problem spots so you can smooth them out, the next thing that a metronome can do for you is to steadily raise the speed of an exercise in a reliable and measurable manner. Reliable because you can see a steady progression when using a metronome in a shorter amount of time overall than you can just hacking away at it on your own. And measurable because trying to track your progress on something as gradual as increasing the tempo of an exercise is like trying to watch grass grow. You may be making progress in baby steps, but most times it's impossible to perceive that progress. The irony here is that once you increase the speed of playing something by a little bit, that new speed becomes your new normal. But you assume you're still at a slow speed because it doesn't feel like you're working that hard anymore. I've had students play something for me that they've been working really hard on and complain that they're making no progress, only to realize that they're already at speed when I get them to play along with the original track. This factor alone is one of the biggest reasons why most musicians give up out of frustration and just say screw it, because it seems like they're making no progress at all from their perspective when they're actually inching imperceivably forward by baby steps. However, with a metronome, you have an actual number, the BPM or beats per minute, to tell you the real progress you're making behind the scenes. Keeping good track of these numbers will allow you to see a very encouraging map of your progress over time. This not only gives you perspective, but also gives you motivation to continue. If you can see that you're making progress even in baby steps, this can be a powerful motivator to keep walking the path and not give up. Now, like any habit you want to build, using a metronome can be tricky to start with at first. But in addition to just the pain in the butt of making it a regular habit, some musicians also have a fear that a metronome will take away their natural human feel and make them sound like a robot. Let's address that factor for a moment. As I mentioned before, we squishy and imperfect humans are subject to a whole bunch of different factors that affect our tempo. Now, don't get me wrong here. Sometimes this looseness can really contribute in a good way to a player's sound, making the music sound more organic and making a song breathe, so to speak, or even sound raw and grungy.
I took a freight train to be my friend. Oh, Lord.
But on the opposite extreme, a drum machine is always going to be perfect, sometimes in a way that can be unpleasant to listen to in certain styles, but just perfect in others. While most musicians might want accurate rhythm, many don't necessarily want to sound like a machine either. However, here's a spoiler alert. I can tell you right now that you don't need to worry. No matter how much you work with a metronome, you will never really eliminate your organic humanity, and that's a good thing. Your playing will never be truly like a machine. The fact that you're not a Borg or an android will ensure that.
You will be assimilated.
If having good playing skills were like having a dog, using your metronome is like having a well-trained, obedient dog, while not using a metronome is like having that bratty, undisciplined dog who goes chasing every car that drives by in the neighborhood. The goal in using a metronome is to make your playing more machine-like, not as in robotic, but machine-like as in accurate or tight. This factor, combined with your natural human or loose playing tendencies shining through it, will eventually create a delicious mix of tight looseness, which is really another way of saying groove in the music world. The opposite of this, and the result of never tightening up on your tempo, creates a loose looseness, which is just another way of saying sloppy in the music world. Think about it like this. You can dress like a bohemian or hippie. That's your human tempo. But let's say you're freshly showered and your clothes are clean and well kept and you smell and look good and approachable. Others might say that you're laid back but have good style. That's using a metronome. It literally cleans up your playing. However, you can wear those same bohemian clothes that are all torn up and dirty from not washing them, and you could be really stinky from not showering for the last 3 days. Much less approachable. Other people might say you're basically just a slob. That's not ever tightening up on your rhythm. The fear some musicians have, though, is that using a metronome will turn them into somebody who's wearing a suit and tie, musically speaking, when this is not their goal. However, once you have the skill of accurate rhythm, thanks to your metronome work, you can vary your tempo at will on your own terms with pinpoint fine accuracy, instead of being a slave to your own organic processes jerking your rhythm around all over the place. In other words, you will now have conscious control over the tempo of your playing, while your natural tastes and style will shine through. You'll still just yourself, but with the upgrade of having ninja skills over your tempo. That means you decide what you want to do with those skills. Musically speaking, you could wear a suit and tie, you could wear Hawaiian shirt flip-flops, or you could dress like a hippie. It's just now those clothes are all clean and well kept instead of being sloppy and gross. So that's the next reason why using a metronome is important. It gives you ninja-level conscious control over your own tempo. And of course, you decide what you're going to do with those skills. If practicing playing on your instrument is like a ninja practicing their sword play, then working with a metronome sharpens that sword. Incidentally, I have never once regretted using a metronome over my music career, and sometimes I still pull one out when I need help on a particularly challenging exercise. But over time, I've found that using a metronome has entrained the music part of my brain to have such a solid rhythm that I don't necessarily always need one, since I've mostly internalized what accurate rhythm feels and sounds like. That's one of the upsides. However, don't get too overconfident here. Even with good rhythm, many professional musicians can still fluctuate based on a number of factors, like their own personal choices in the moment, or even the environment and other factors that can affect your playing outside your control. So, using a metronome is only just one of the tools in your arsenal to make you a better musician. So, that's a basic overview of why I think you should use a metronome. Obviously, this is a deep rabbit hole subject, and there's a large list of other reasons to use it. So keep in mind this is just an overview of what I feel are the most important reasons. On other videos on my channel, I'm going to be diving even deeper down that rabbit hole regarding how to best use a metronome to your advantage. So check those out too if you're interested in exploring this subject further. I'm Tyson Farmer from TysonFarmer.com. Thanks for checking out my video. Stay self-motivated and keep playing.